Okay, well, I am originally from Nova Scotia, and I was born and raised in Sydney, Nova Scotia, to a stay-at-home mom and a dad that worked on the steel plant doing shift work. I'm the youngest of 3 siblings. I have a sister who unfortunately died of breast cancer at 45, and a brother who is a psychologist who has been my inspiration and my support throughout my entire life. And actually, as I was growing up, I went to St. FX University, and I did an honors program in psychology, 4-year program. And I was at a crossroads. I just didn't know what to do next with my life. And my brother talked to me and said, "Did you ever consider social work?" And I was like, "No, I don't even know what that's all about." So he had talked to me about the fact that he had worked with a few social workers and found them to be very helpful. And also, there was a number of opportunities for different, career in social work, but doing different jobs. Like, for instance, you could work in health, you could work in schools, you could work for government, you could work child welfare. And so that really intrigued me to think, okay, I'll look into that. So I did apply to Dalhousie, which was also known as the Maritime School of Social Work at that time. And I applied to Lakehead University, got accepted at both. But of course, Dalhousie offered the master's program, which was a 2-year program after you had a 4-year undergrad. So I went to Dal and took the courses and graduated in 1977. And I felt like I had a really good grounding. I was with a tremendous group of people. I think there was only about 20 in each class, so it was a 2-year program. And but the majority of people had come back to work. They had been working already, and they were upgrading their skills. Their departments were sending them back so that they would actually either get a diploma in social work or a master's in social work. So I had a bit of a difficult time because I came straight from university. And therefore, even though people were very gracious with me, they really poo-pooed the fact that I didn't have any work experience. So that was a bit difficult for me. And oftentimes I think, God, I'd like to do it all over again. And but I still think when you're new, and even if you don't have a lot of experience, people can still learn from you. So that's basically how I ended up in social work. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered a job, but in child welfare, prior to graduating. So this was in February. I was to graduate in May. And the executive director of Cape Breton Children's Aid Society contacted me and asked me to come home for the weekend and interviewed me and offered me a job on the spot. I was a little concerned about that because I wanted to see what other opportunities were out there for me. But my dad was like, "Darlene, you've got student loans to pay, you've got bills to pay, you need to take this job and not sit around waiting if something else is going to land in your lap." So I ended up taking the job and going to Cape Breton and starting my career in child welfare.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
Very exciting.
It was very exciting. And when I started at the Children's Aid Society of Cape Breton, I worked with, they were called unmarried parents at that point in time, and adoption. And then, this has never happened to me in the rest of my career, but our agency went on strike. And so after a 3-week strike, which was very scary and whatever else, they changed people's jobs. So when we came back, I was put in frontline protection. And even though after a couple of weeks they came to me and said, "You can go back to your old position if you want," I thought, no, the one great thing about child welfare is you're always learning, and you always have the opportunity to do new things. So I've been in one position for 2 years, then I moved into child protection, learning, and so it just kept evolving that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I did about 5 years at the agency in Cape Breton. then I had the opportunity to leave the province and go to Winnipeg. Oh my God. So anyway, I did go to Winnipeg, and I just decided, well, I applied for 2 different jobs, but I decided because the city was new to me and everything else, I should probably get into a field that I already was familiar with. So I had applied to the Winnipeg Child and Family Services, or CAS of Winnipeg, and got a position there. I'd never planned on staying in Winnipeg, but I met my husband, and 37 years later, and we have a gorgeous daughter, and so that part becomes history. I'm still very connected to back home because my brother is there and his family, and my nieces and nephews are there as well. So I'm back and forth quite a bit.
Great.
Okay.
Can I just take you back just a little bit to ask you a couple questions about the master's program?
Sure.
Okay. As part of the master's program, did you do placements? Could you tell us a bit about your placement?
Yes, I did do placement. It was, I should just say, it was a very intensive course, certainly compared to some things I've seen in today. Basically, we had courses Monday to Wednesday afternoon, and it was like from 8:30 to 4:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then half day on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday was your field placement. So I did 2 years, and I did 1 field placement at the IWK hospital, and then the second year I did the Nova Scotia hospital. So interesting, so my grounding was kind of in hospital social work, and then I landed in child welfare, but never looked back after that, so.
Super. So once you came to Winnipeg, and you worked in child and family services here, what happened?
Well, I took the job, and there wasn't a lot. I really, at that point in time, had 5 years in, so I was sort of looking at a supervisor's role or job, but there was little or absolutely no turnover at that point in time. And so anyway, so I worked frontline protection and did a variety of different things. When I first arrived, I was working with children in care, and there was a unit of 6 of us, and then we were attached to another unit of family services, and so we worked together collectively. And then Winnipeg had a lot of what would you want to say, child welfare changed quite a bit in Winnipeg. It was a big agency. It was centralized. And then, so I worked there from 82 to about 85, and around 85, I can't be quite sure on the dates, but around 85, they ended up moving Winnipeg into more area-based programming. So that was really interesting. So we got to move into our different areas of the city. And I learned to do things like intake. I also learned to do things like working with sexually abused girls, and lots of teenagers on my caseload. So basically I did that, and then in 86, one of the supervisors finally left, went on a leave of absence, and they asked me to take over that unit. So I ended up taking over the unit, and then I got pregnant with our daughter. And I remember my boss, who was terrific with me, but basically said, oh, you just need to stay at home and concentrate on your daughter. At that point in time, they only gave you a 3-month maternity leave, and I had had a C-section with that as well. When I was on maternity leave, I got a phone call from another area of the city asking me if I would apply and come in for an interview as a supervisor. So I actually did that and got offered the job. So I got to call my boss and say, I'm going to be leaving. He asked me not to do that. And they came up with a supervisor job for myself at that point in time. Unfortunately, I had to go back to work right after 3 months of having my daughter. But anyway, so I continued to supervise. And then in around 91, to 97, there was all kinds of changes again happening. And I was offered what was called a director of service job. And so, well, I should say I was offered. I applied and got the director of service. And that was a really unique experience because I got to meet and work with 4 other directors. So we worked all across the city and certainly learned from each other. And it just constantly evolving and doing things differently. It was quite good. Then I went on from there to, it was sort of devolved into other areas and became, like I said, it was program-based. And the programs were like quality assurance, community, permanency planning and adoption. And then I had applied again and was given protection. I had like about 17 units of protection. I think it was 17 supervisors I had. I had 3 program managers. And I was like, why didn't I get that little quality assurance job? Whatever. So anyway, it was just a very unique experience, and again, got to learn and got to do all kinds of things in those particular jobs. And then in, I would say, I'm trying to think of the dates in that. Oh, in 2006, the person who was the chief executive officer was, I wouldn't use the word, well, I guess he was seconded into government. So they asked me to take over for 6 months. And so I got to run the agency, which had about totally about 600 staff or whatever. And anyway, I was supposed to be there for 6 months, and I ended up being there for about 6 years, from 2006 to about 2011, so 5 years. And so that was part of it. And then, of course, all kinds of things happened throughout that. And then in 2011, I had the opportunity to apply for Children's Advocate, Manitoba's Children's Advocate, and I applied for that, and I was interviewed and got that particular job. And so the mandate at that point in time was for like a 3-year term with a possible renewal, not guaranteed, but a possible renewal for 3 years. So in total, 6 years. So from 2011 to 2017. So I ended up being the Manitoba's Children's Advocate, and then I retired.
Wow.
So it sort of took you through it very quickly, but yeah.
Oh, wow, that's like kind of like a rocket ship. So maybe we could just go back and you could tell me a little bit, maybe you have some stories that you might want to share about those experiences. And also, I'm just curious about the process of sort of moving from leadership position to leadership position, because making the transition from being a frontline worker to being a supervisor is often something that workers find quite stressful.
Right.
And then, again, making that transition to managing service and then managing the agency and then working as an advocate for the whole province. That's many different layers of leadership. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about skills, challenges.
Well, I think my first challenge was the fact that I moved from Nova Scotia then to Manitoba, and still waiting for an opportunity, thinking, okay, I basically worked about 10 years in frontline, but I'm very proud of that. And when I look back at that, I think it gave me the skills. It certainly earned me a great deal of respect from my workers who felt I had done it. I lived the work. I knew what I was talking about. And so I think that in particular helped me, as opposed to somebody else coming in and going directly into a management position. And I guess because I had done that, I felt I had the skills and abilities to sort of push the envelope and to try and look at different things. And although with my units, I would say my focus was always on the children and families. But at the same point in time, I really felt that staff had to be supported, because if they're not supported to do their job, then they don't give good service to children and families. So I certainly created an atmosphere where they could challenge respectfully, hopefully, and that we looked at different things that they could have some say in, like policies and procedures, because they're out there every day doing the job, and they, you know, needed the opportunity to be able to say, hey, you know, caseloads are too high, or we need more resources, and I created an atmosphere where they could actually do that. So I think that was really helpful. One of the things that I actually ended up doing with my staff was also doing what was called staff engagement, where they did have the opportunity to talk about policy changes, and we were able to bring that up the table leadership-wise and to government, which ultimately could make some changes. So able to do that. We also created something called critical stress incident team, and that was because, as you probably know, social workers face a lot of different circumstances, some very traumatic stuff. Also, you know, children die, and also many different you know, situations where they just really needed a chance to debrief. And so that was one of the unique things in Winnipeg, Winnipeg Child and Family, that we were able to create, was this staff engagement and critical stress incident, where we came together monthly. Every supervisor was obligated to report any kind of incident to this team, and we got to review it and put resources in place that a social worker might need to be able to get back into the workforce. Or it was interesting because, I mean, everyone is an individual, right? There were social workers who had experienced some trauma and needed to take some time off, but there are other people who were just saying, hey, I don't have family here. You know, my unit's my family. I want to be here. I don't want to be sitting at home trying to watch TV or doing anything. I just really need to get back into the workforce and feel supported. And so we were able to do all of that. But it was very unique experience, and something that I really highly valued and is still used today. So quite good. And we were able to, we were overseen by what's called now the General Authority, and they were able to implement it in all their other agencies as well. So.
And could you explain what the General Authority is?
Okay, well, see, with Winnipeg, there were many different, I don't know, different things that happened. As I said, when I came, it was a big centralized agency, and then it was decentralized into program-based or community-based. And they had directors, like boards of directors, and then eventually government came in and took over those, and was created 4 different authorities. One was the General Authority, Southern Authority, Métis Authority, and Northern Authority. And it's pretty much, it is like that today as well. So
just to make sure that I understand, and for folks who are not from Manitoba who might not understand the structure, there was a large, like, not-for-profit organization that was then divested into smaller organizations, but then it was subsumed by government,
right,
and then divided on a regional basis.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
At first of all, it devolved again to programs, and then from programs it went back to what was called authorities. So,
Right. So like the district authority for,
yeah,
okay,
which
gotcha.
actually fits very nicely with the legislation, Bill 92, which was just passed, federal legislation, where the Aboriginal agencies can now create their own legislation.
Okay.
So,
Another change coming.
yes, well, yeah, it's been like that, and yeah, but I think it's a good change. It's,
Yes, important. So, I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase the question that I want to ask. Again, with the sort of the leadership piece, so it sounds like you were very like equally focused on worker and family needs in terms of responding to change needs of those both. Boy, I'm really tongue-tied. Sorry.
well,
I guess I'm just wondering, you know, at the supervisory level, you know, you have one kind of relationship with workers. Do you need a different set of skills when you move up that next level to director of service, and then do you need different skills in the various leadership places or spaces?
yeah, I think you always have to look at you know, what you bring to the table, and it is very different supervising a group of social workers, and then moving up the line to then you know, supervising supervisors, and you know, reporting to an executive director, and you know, or as I said, when we did have the directors of service, you have 4 directors, but they're still overseeing supervisors, et cetera, et cetera. So very much different skill level. And also for yourself, you need to look at a support, right, where it's very different. It's one thing when you're supervising your unit and you're supporting them and whatever, and then when you're moving into trying to supervise supervisors, it is a different set of skills, and also making sure that they have the resources and ability to do their job, and also making sure that you have good peer relationships, not yourself, but the supervisors themselves have good peer relationships and are able to problem solve and have the ability to be able to ask questions and also not get shut down too. So yeah, there are different levels in there, and like you had said at the beginning, you do have some different relationships with people, and some are good and some are not that good, and you know, but that's a skill level too, because you get to learn what is it I can get from that executive director that will enhance my skills, but what about the person that I'm not really communicating very well with, or we don't seem to be getting along very well, but I've learned a long time ago that you learn with that as well, because you get to see what you don't want to do, how you don't want to supervise people, how you want to build an atmosphere of trust, and also just a security so that they can talk and figure out what it is that they need to do to be able to support their own workers, who in turn will support children and families. So, but I can go back to a couple of stories. You know, I'm very fortunate that I started off in Nova Scotia, and especially as frontline, we got to see some unique happenings in the community and how community really supported the children and families, and that I can't say no, well, of course children came into care for all different sorts of reasons, but really community was terrific in finding supports and relatives coming forward so that children didn't have to come into care, and that was, I think, quite unique. And I ended up driving all over Cape Breton, which was interesting, and you had your caseloads, they were in all different areas. And there was a person that I worked with, a peer, who had responsibility for the reserve. But she had gone on vacation, And so I ended up covering her caseload. And I will never forget this. This stayed with me. It has stayed with me the rest of my life. That I had a grandmother call me from the reserve and said, you know, there had been a big drinking party going on, and there was some domestic violence. And she said, Darlene, I don't want you to come here and take the kids, but I'm telling you this. And what I want you to do is I want you to come up and drive your car around slowly. Don't stop, but drive your car around slowly so I can tell people that you're coming in and those children are going to be removed unless we can get them into a safe environment. And that was amazing to me. And for a minute there, I thought, oh, this is social work. I'm driving my car around and whatever. But yet this grandmother certainly had the handle on the community, and she was able to implement, you know, a safe environment for these kids who otherwise would have come into care. So I've never forgotten that. I thought that was really unique and really interesting. So.
I'm just curious about, like I worked in child welfare, but only for 4 years. I did not have the longitudinal strength that you had. And one of the challenges always was the ideas that people might have had around creative practice versus the requirements of legislation. So I'm just wondering, like, that story demonstrates sort of a creative solution that might or might not be seen as okay under the legislation. Right. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that in terms of that kind of not chasm, but like the disconnection sometimes between how we do things and what the paperwork says.
Yeah, legislation is legislation, but I think as a social worker, you need to get creative in working with children and families. And also you have to push the envelope a little bit. You know, in Winnipeg, it's changed now, but at the same point in time, you know, I worked with a child who had muscular dystrophy, and in order for him to be extended into care and be well looked after, he had to be made what was called a permanent ward. And I really challenged that, and we were able to push the envelope and find some creative solutions to that, where he was able to stay in care and stay with his foster parents. Now, legislation was very firm on it, but we did find a way around that. And he was able to stay with his foster parents until he passed away, unfortunately, at age 23. But technically, he would have been out of care at 18. So you do look for creative solutions. And I guess throughout my practice, too, I've never forgotten, you know, the people that I work with. This one lady who said to me, she finally got her 4 children back. And she said, you know, Darlene, I did this all on my own. She said, yeah, you provided the resources, and you were a pain because you were here every couple of weeks, and you were in my face, and I really wanted nothing more than to get rid of you. And she said, so I worked hard. And she said, you know, but you did give the resources, which is something that I think social workers need to be able to do, right? To be able to find the resources and to help children and families. Yeah, because, and again, when you talk about, you know, doing things a little bit differently, I was always amazed at my workers too that would come up with great solutions to things, and you know, look for relatives that can take the kids in rather than placing them into care. So yeah, there's just so many nuances about child welfare and what we can do and what we can't do. But things are evolving, and but you need to be able to support the relatives too, and that's financial support as well. You know, people are saying, I want to take in my nieces and my nephews, but then, you know, I have somebody banging down my door, and I need to look after my own family as well. So very unique situations. But, yeah.
I'm curious, you know, in Ontario anyway, in the mid-90s, maybe late 90s, we went to a very standardized approach to doing child welfare practice, whereas there had been a little bit more space for each organization to kind of shape its own way of practicing. You have to meet the standards, but
Right.
you know, how you got the standards met was less standardized than it became in the mid-90s. I'm just wondering if you had any experience with those kinds of changes as a leader, the the greater degree of standardization in practice, and how that would have affected your leadership.
You mean about, I'm not sure what you mean.
So in Ontario,
Okay.
you know, like in 1992, when I started working as a placement student in child welfare, we didn't have like a standardized assessment model.
Okay.
We had, tools that we could use, but the worker could pick or choose whichever ones they used. Then in the mid-90s, we developed the Ontario Risk Assessment model, which had to be used. I think you guys had the Manitoba scale.
Right. Yeah, MRES. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So there was a particular way that everyone did it. And some people saw that as good, and some people saw it as bad, but certainly would have affected your leadership within the organization. So I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Well, I think, thankfully, things have evolved, I think, for the better. And I know when I came, especially to Winnipeg, it was probably in Nova Scotia too, a big book of standards, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with all of these things, and how do you even find anything? But practice evolved over time, and different things were used, like the MRES, Manitoba Risk Assessment, but thankfully that evolved too into now, which is called the practice model. And I think that became, I don't want to say if it's easier, but at least there was training about it, and that was a big piece that was missing. I think you were handed we would call it the blue book. You were handed the blue book, and here's your 40 cases or whatever you got, and go to it, right? Whereas today, I think there's been a lot more implementation about the fact that, you shouldn't have a caseload until you've been working for 6 months, and that you also have had all this standardized training. And I think that's really important, because social workers, I can't say, you're unique, so you do things differently just by being a different person, right? But if you're following the same practice model, and today it can be, I don't want to say it's basic, but it does talk about, okay, what are your worries? Where's your support system? And then where do we go from here? And I was always pushing the envelope on contracting. I'm a big believer in contracting too. And by contracting, I mean, with the client, or mom or dad, what is it you need to do to get your children back, or to keep your children safe and secure? But also, what do I need to do to help you? And also, much more in this day and age of bringing resources together, sitting at a table, talking about a case plan and how do we develop a case plan. And I think that has evolved over time and is much, much better system than somebody coming in and they don't understand what they have to do to get their children back, right? So whether it's attending rehab or any number of things, then it's clearly outlined what they have to do. And it's not going to do any good if they can't get into a program for 7 months, right? So I think the social worker needs to come up with what's available for them and work alongside them to make sure that they have the resources that they need. Also, as we know, housing is a big issue for people, and financially too. How do people exist, and how do you help them get social assistance, etc. So I think I deviated from your question, but you're absolutely right. I think we've gone from the big blue book with thousands of pages down to a practice model that makes much more sense, and are tools that I wish I had when I was at the front line. So
it's great to hear that it's evolved in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other stories? I don't want to move on too quickly, but are there other stories that you would like to share about your work within the?
Oh, there's probably thousands of stories. nothing that I can think of the top of my head. It's just, I mean, I've just met so many tremendous people, right? And from teenage girls who were yelling and screaming at me to go back to Nova Scotia, to the fact that they invited me to their wedding, you know. So you got to see people evolve and change over time, and you hope that you played a little role in that. So, yeah, but no, I've had good opportunity, and I think I've worked hard though, and moved up the ladder and got to be in leadership positions where hopefully I've made some changes too, and also holding government accountable in certain ways, like particularly in the advocate's office where we made recommendations and wanted to put in place doable recommendations. Though, I mean, anybody can sit back and do pie in the sky type thing and say, give me this amount of money, let me do this, let me do that, or you need to, as government, you're responsible, you need to do that. If it's not doable, it's not doable, and what a waste of time and energy that is for everybody, right? So you try and do what you can and bring attention to people who can ultimately make the changes. So, yeah. So, anyway.
Were there particular mentors that you had along the way that helped you learn skills?
Yeah, I would say I used a variety of mentors, and I think my brother was my first mentor. And then supervisors that, like I said, there were some supervisors that were very good, and I learned to work and to pick up pieces from them as well. And then one particular executive director who I think took me under his wing a little bit, and I was able to learn from him. And one of the sad things, though, as you move up the leadership role, right, you don't really have as much of a support system. I mean, of course, my family has always been there for me, but you don't have the support system that you can really talk to your workers about what you're going through personally, or what you've seen, or what you're trying to change, but yet, maybe you can't really share the nuances of that with your teams at that point in time. And yeah, so I would recommend anybody moving up the ladder to have some coaching, have some people that they will actually help them out. In the leadership role at the Children's Advocate, there are a number of, we're called independent officers. We report to the Legislature, and the person in the role as the Ombudsman, the Auditor General, Elections Manitoba, we would get together on a monthly basis, and although we did different work, still the experiences were unique about how we felt challenged as a person, where do we go with things, and they were a tremendous support. And actually I've maintained contact with three of them, and we get together on a regular basis, and I still think it's a mentoring support system that I really, really value, and hopefully they do too. So.
So since retiring, have you
Have I retired?
Have you really retired? Because many social workers don't. They just find new ways of doing the work.
Yeah. I should just share, there was a couple of things in my 6 years as the Children's Advocate. I worked very, very hard to change the legislation. I mean, you work with government, of course, in conjunction with government and changing the legislation. So we were successful in changing the 3-year term of the advocate to a 5-year term with a possible renewal for 5 years. So in total, that advocate can be around for 10 years, which enables you to make lots of changes. Having the role for 3 years and then wondering, oh, you're going to be, rehired or not. You were just getting your feet wet at that point in time. So I think that was extremely important. Also, the legislation that we had was very, very narrow. It was just child welfare. And you reviewed child welfare, or you reviewed deaths of children who were in the child welfare agency a year prior to their death. So, you know, that's changed. It's broadened the mandate now where the advocate's office can look at, you know, justice and mental health, addictions. So it gives much more of a wide variety. The other thing, and I'll get to my point. The other thing I looked at is, you know, of course, we're all over Manitoba, right? It is the Manitoba Advocate, so your jurisdiction is all of Manitoba, which it should be. And we ended up, this came up from my team, they wanted an office in Thompson, Manitoba. So I was able to secure the funding for that and push that through. But the sad thing was my mandate finished in April 2017. The legislation had been tabled, but it was delayed and it went through in June. And then our Thompson office too went through in about September. So it was a little sad that I didn't get to experience that or to be part of it. But again, I think also a good leader establishes things for the next leader to be able to take over. So that was a little bit bittersweet. But at that point in time, I felt, you know, my husband and I had discussed it, that I would do this for 6 years and then that would take me right into retirement. Or I should say, hopefully do it for 6 years, because I wasn't quite sure, but it did, and took me into retirement. There were opportunities in government, which I chose. I wanted to at least take some time off and regroup and get my energy back and my focus. But I also have maintained my involvement with the Canadian Association of Social Workers, CASW, and also the provincial organization here, which is the Manitoba College of Social Workers. So actually, as of tomorrow, I finish my 6-year terms with both of those. And I am also a member of, or on the General Authority Board. So that's a government appointed, and so I'm on there. And I'll continue that work until, I guess, my term is finished or whatever happens at that. Sometimes when government comes over, we've just had a new government, they actually change all the board of directors. So I don't know what will happen, but I certainly have stayed involved. Also, throughout my entire career, I've been involved in many organizations, the Child Welfare League of Canada. So maintained an involvement with that over a number of years. And I was also president of the Canadian Association of Social Workers and vice president. And then, you know, held many roles on the provincial council as well. So, okay.
So I'm curious about the experience of, you know, working in the context of like social work regulation or social work, like leadership for the profession.
Mm-hmm.
What's that like compared to running an agency? Are there similarities, differences?
Well, I mean, I think every social worker should be registered person, you know, for protection of the public, and the fact that you are required to take additional training or and to keep up your staff development, so to speak. So I think that is really important. You know, the interesting thing is government doesn't mandate that social workers have to be registered, which I think is unfortunate. So I wish that would change, and I'm hoping it will change over time. But I mean, I've been involved with the college and a registered social worker myself since the early 1990s. So I've been actively involved and you know, been part of the push to actually get legislation so that we would have protection of the title of social worker. And now I'm trying to push the envelope, because as a retired social worker, you don't get to use term social worker if you're not still registered. And at some point in time, I probably want to become what we would call as non-practicing, right? So, and I guess people question it, but my whole identity, I'll talk about myself, has been as a social worker too. And so once I retire, why am I not allowed to use that term, right? Social worker. I can say I'm a non-practicing member of the college, but really, whatever. So anyway, the executive director, I'm sure I give her headaches at times, but I'll continue, and she knows where I'm coming from, so we'll continue to work that, and hopefully with a group of retired social workers, we'll push the envelope on that one. So
more advocacy work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, continue the advocacy work. Yeah.
Well, are there any other stories or any other information? I know you had some reports. I don't know if you wanted to talk about those.
Yeah, I have anyway, maybe I'll just take a gander through. Oh, I know what I wanted to say though. One of the neatest things I have is that, I've had so many opportunities during the course of my, my career, and one of the most outstanding things I remember was the official closing ceremony of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it was with all the advocates across Canada, and we were there, and it was just amazing to be part of that, to be on stage, to hear what was happening, and just to have the opportunity, and one of my staff members went with me, so it was just phenomenal. They had a little garden outside where little children were planting, and it was just a phenomenal thing to witness, to be part of, and to witness, and so that was really, really interesting. So. Trying to think. Also, with the Canadian Association of Social Workers, I've gone to many conferences in Hong Kong representing Canada, and standing there with a flag, like that was truly inspirational, and by being part of the many organizations, I think that helped with more of a global perspective instead of just being in your little silo, right, and not knowing what else is going on with the rest of the world. So I think that was, and I would encourage any social worker, to take those opportunities and get involved with their associations and volunteer. And I think it just helps you so much more with a bigger global perspective of what's going on in the world and what you need to do and how you can advocate. So, but yeah, that was, and you started to ask me about, yeah. So, when I came into the advocate's office, we had been behind about 2 years. The advocate before me had been off on sick leave, so we had been behind on what was called annual reports, and you were mandated to do an annual report, but it just wasn't getting done. So anyway, when I came in, I started to do things, and the biggest thing was change through engagement, and I think that has to do a lot with my personal philosophy about you need to be able to engage with the community and talk about things and find out what they need to have changed. And there was concern that the office was very isolated and doing things on their own without involving community stakeholders. So during the course of the time, we were able to, we had an advisory board, but we also reached out to the youth and got a circle of youth, so to speak, to help us with some of our programming. So we were able to do that. And then, we were able to put in stats and put in what our recommendations were to government, and then holding government accountable by even doing things like report cards and and different things like that. But each year was different, like Geared for Success, and then annual reports, and like Little Voices, Big Echo, just talking about the children, and then doing different reports. As I said, our mandate was very, very limited, so you couldn't, now the advocate can do a number of reports and get them out publicly. Ours couldn't be public reports, so we had to be very careful of how we got information out. But I think over time people saw our offices changing and being more inclusive, and certainly reaching out to youth. And I often say that through child welfare, I learned, and I credit Nova Scotia with that, seeing things through the families or the parents' eyes, and wanting to keep families together. And the advocate's office, I started to look and learn through the eyes of a child as well, and how paramount that was and how important that was. So yeah, so no, it's been an incredible journey. It's
Sounds like
been,
it. Wow.
yeah. So I keep thinking there's tons of things I've probably have left out or haven't even crossed, but.
Any final thoughts, any advice for folks who want to begin their own leadership journey?
Well, I think social work is a great career. I think that people who want to explore the opportunity shouldn't be afraid of all the opportunities out there, and decide that there's a vast number of things they could do, and you never know where your passion will lie, right? So with me getting offered a child welfare job, hey, and my classmates looking at me saying, you're crazy going into child welfare, you have a master's degree, you can, basically saying you can do anything. And my dad saying, pay your bills. No, but at the same point in time, I mean, it sounds a bit silly, but whoever would have thought that child welfare would be my passion, and look at where it has led me, and the opportunities it has presented itself have been totally amazing. So don't frown on opportunities out there, or don't poo-poo them. You never just know where your passion's going to lie in that. So, and again, to be, you'll have great supervisors, you'll have not so great supervisors, but it's a learning curve as well, and it's important to figure out those not so great supervisors either, so that you can decide how you would treat your team, or your clients, or your families, whatever. So yeah, and it's, I think, a world of continuous learning, right? Things are always evolving and changing in social work, and it does sometimes scare me that other professions seem to be taking over some of our roles, and that's sad, but that's why it's important to be part of your provincial association, and challenge that a little bit more, because we're unique, we have unique roles. Learning from staff, and was the fact that under the general authority, of course, we had a number of Aboriginal people, but as well many more newcomers and refugees. And so the staff were feeling extremely overwhelmed because they were dispersed throughout different units. And they came up with the idea that could we centralize the unit so that we would have people who had the correct languages, or had access to the correct languages, that had, could build the resources and actually give more one-on-one, because they felt that working with newcomers, although rewarding, was very, very demanding, and wanted to be able to centralize it into a unit. So that actually came to being, and we were able to create a newcomer unit, and which actually stayed in existence up until about last year, I believe. Now it's devolved again into units, but people are just saying we need to have the resources that are at our fingertips, right? Rather than and also colleagues together in a unit that can talk to each other about what we have to provide. And it was very well recognized in the community as well that there was a centralized unit that dealt with language barriers, that dealt with the resources, that dealt with the housing, that had connections back to the community. So that was something I was very proud of. But again, that came from the staff, and that's part of creating the opportunity for staff to say, hey, we do the work. We have some really good ideas about what needs to change and what needs to happen. So that was one of the things I've been very proud of in helping to create.